So one of my goals for this boat was to have a decent place to keep the washdown hoses. I definitely wanted washdown capability, and the hoses storage can be an issue. So I knew I had some room behind those front closure panels that I just finished. So I was going to make some cubbies, or I am making cubbies to store the hose. And then my biggest angst about this is how do I make a decent looking piece of trim, face trim, which will be the anchor point for these hose boxes, and it also allows them to be removable because they are basically big giant access hatches to mechanical stuff behind them. So first impression was I can cut a cove on my table saw on a piece of wood, and I can use that cove as a mold to lay up some pretty half round trim. And then I realized if I used a mold like that and made the trim in long pieces, I was going to have to miter the corners. I didn't want mitered corners. I wanted rounded corners. So we punted on that deal. So I took my little box form and I did the first glass job on it. I hope to use this same box twice. And the laying schedule was pretty unusual. It was basically, let's use up all the scraps that are in the shop, because it really doesn't matter. It needs to be strong, but it's not life or death kind of deal. It's pretty thick. I'll let it cure, and hopefully I can get it off the form without damaging the form or the fiberglass. My little box is cured, so I'm going to see if I can't get it off the form without breaking anything. I'm having trouble getting it off the box. I got the edges loose on both the long sides and the short sides, and I had drilled holes in the mold and I blew air in it, and the bottom's loose, but these corners are not letting go. I don't want to wreck my mold because I want to make another one just like it. So I think I'm going to cut the fiberglass right here, open it up a little bit, get it off, and then I can put the fiberglass back together and it won't wreck my mold. I think that's my current plan. Well, I was kind of thinking I'd get 2 and possibly 4 fiberglass casts off of this mold. Apparently I got to rethink that, because I still don't have part of the mold out of the middle of this thing. Just terrible design. It wouldn't let go. Well, I got one cast. I got it out of the mold, and it's certainly savable. It was a couple inches deeper than it needed to be anyway, so all this jagged edge gets cut off. But I'm probably going to have to make another mold, and I'm going to have to figure out another way to do it, because I've just spent an hour trying to get this thing apart. Okay, the first mold was too big, and plus I broke it getting the glass off, so I can't reproduce it. The second mold, I don't know, I got the angles that just don't look right. Third mold, this is the one. I'm gonna make this mold so that I can get it out from inside the fiberglass, and we're gonna make at least 2 of these and maybe 4. These would be like little cubby holes on the side of the front trim panel. So we sanded the box, rounded all the edges with the router, and I covered it with epoxy to make it sandable, and the packing tape no way will stick to the press board. It'll stick pretty well to the epoxy. And now I'm putting a brace on the inside. Since I've cut it, I don't want it to completely fall apart. So it's just a scrap of wood with lots of screws to keep that part of it stable before I finish off these cuts and make it into 3 different pieces. In hindsight, if I could have got this tape on there without any wrinkles, I'd have saved myself a lot of sanding, but it was giving me a hard time. It just kept wanting to wrinkle, and after a while I just gave up and just put it on there. So all the surfaces are covered with tape so the polyester won't stick, and the crack is covered with tape so the polyester can't get in the crack. So my hope is that I will be able to, after it's glass, turn it over, unscrew the brace, pull out that center wedge,
and that should loosen up the other two pieces. We'll see. So this is my cast. It's all chop mat and it's a mess. I'm going to clean up the edges and we'll see if we can't get the mold out from the middle of it. And I'll do it on the camera so you can see me cry. So we trimmed up the edges with the oscillating tool, and now I take all these screws out that are holding this splice plate in the bottom. It should come out because there's no glue or anything on it.
I've got a sharp razor blade and I'm trying to cut the tape so I won't have to fight the tape when I'm trying to get the center part of the mold out. That tape can be a little bit tenacious. Had a hard time in the corners reaching it, so when I did the second one I used a fillet knife and got in there better. So I put 3 screws in the bottom. They don't go all the way through, but they give me something to grab onto. And then I used a little cat's paw and a little scrap of wood to pry, and the little thing, the little center part just popped right out.
Yes. So the little form's back together and ready to go again. And I think the key is to have this wedge-shaped section in the middle that I can pull out, you know, from the top. And then having a crack here and sealing that with packing tape so that the pieces are loose. There's never a big bind. Oops, I just knocked this loose. So I'm going to cover it with packing tape again, and we're going to do one more, just like the other one, except maybe a little prettier. So I cast my second little box. I'll have to cut it loose from the dunnage that I had it sitting on and see if I can get the mold out. I don't think I'll have any trouble because I got the first one out. I kind of know.
With my history of getting numbers backwards, I promise you I measured this thing like 10 different times before I put the grinder on it. I really didn't want to cut a hole in the wrong place in my new side panels that I worked so hard to make pretty.
Got my boxes cut and they're going to fit. This one was governed by the fuel fill hose, which is right here. Couldn't go any further back. Further back the better because it gets skinnier up this ways. But I didn't want to go too far back. But now I can get to the fuel fill hose, I can get to the fuel vent line, and I can get to the 2 electrical conduits. and I can get to the conduit that's up under the cap. So this is like an access, but it's also a little box for my little washdown hose. And we got one over here, same issue. I'm gonna have to trim it like I'm gonna trim the other one, but I knew that going in. My little hose will fit in there. I have to put something to keep it. And on this one, I made this distance the same as the one on the other side. And this one I ran into the discharge line for the bait box. So I'm gonna have to re-drill it further back in there. I got plenty of room. Just the 4Ps got me. And I'll have to patch this hole. But otherwise, pretty happy with how this came out. And this gives me an opportunity to get in here and put some stiffeners in this wall so it won't like oil can when we're in the rough water. So I glued stiffener pieces around the perimeter of both boxes, and the top of the stiffener is where I need to trim the box. So I'm going to take all the clamps off and trim them down and go see how they fit in the boat. I got my starboard box jammed back in here again, and I moved it around until it moved again. Trying to get it where it'll drain, so I have to hold it out this way a little bit. Yeah, it's like that. So I'm going to remark it and recut it, and then start messing with trim, some sort of face trim. It needs to be removable, so if I have trim and screw it, then at any time somebody can just take it out to get to the stuff that's behind it. And on this side, I got my second, can you see? Got my second through hole drilled. Got this one patched so I can get on the outside and glass it over. And I got the hoses run, and it was pretty tight, but it was doable. I just wrapped both of the inside perimeters with this mahogany-like, or whatever it is. It's really, really hard. And glued and screwed it. That'll give me something to screw the box to when I get the flanges finished. It also stiffens up the side panel a lot because I brought them all the way down as far as I could on both sides. So the first 3 pieces of trim are glued onto each box, 2 ends and a top. I'm going to go ahead and clean these up, make the inside curve pretty, round the outside curve, and then glue the bottom trims on.
Working with this fiberglass, it just involves a tremendous amount of grinding. It's not real pleasant, a lot of noise, a lot of dust. I pretty much always wear my ear protection. I have a respirator, but with my respirator I can't wear my glasses, and since I'm half blind I gotta sometimes just wear a paper face mask. So I've learned to use my fans to my advantage to keep the stuff away from my face, and I can hold my breath for a minute pretty easily. So a lot of times it looks like I'm breathing all this junk, but I'm just not breathing. So the boxes are coming along pretty nicely. When I put the bottom trim, I made it big, and then I cut this little groove out for the water to drain out. I started fairing, sanding, cleaning up. It goes on forever, seems like. And I put the plumbing in it. Basically, all I have, let's see, let me turn this around. So in each box, I have a hose adapter, a bronze or brass 90 degree, and I have a adapter for PEX on the outside because it's going to be hooked up with PEX tubing. And then I put they're pretty tight, but I put some epoxy on to make sure they don't wiggle around. And the hose, the squirt hose that I bought, just drops in there pretty nicely and attaches to this. So the little lip keeps it. I don't know whether it'll jump out when you're on, running down the river or not and hit a wake. It might, but it doesn't have to be there all the time. But when you're fishing or whatever, it'll keep it off the deck and out of the way. So pretty happy with these things. I've got to do some work on them before I can mount them. Okay, I got the hose boxes lightly clamped into place, and there's a gap across here because the hose boxes are relatively straight, and this filler panel is curved with the boat, so there's a curve there. So I've got it clamped into place where it won't wiggle,
I have packing tape on the boat part here all the way around, and I'm going to fill this with epoxy and let it cure overnight, and then take it off and finish it off, because I want it to fit that curve pretty well. The same on the other one. The other one's a little better, but they both need some epoxy, and hopefully it won't stick. I got enough tape. So the epoxy that I squeezed under there, I now have the curve established. Yeah, on all the pieces. So I'm gonna fill in behind this epoxy with more epoxy and make it flat, sand it straight, and we'll have a better fit, stronger fit. I won't have to really torque down on the screws to get it up tight, and I can use less caulk in the end to make it seal. I think I'm through with the hose cubbies, and I think they're going to be good. I'm going to have to find a way to attach the hose nozzle, because I think it definitely will bounce out. Other than that, pretty happy with them. Of course, you can always sand more. That's a never-ending process. At some point, I'm just going to call it good. This won't be a showboat as far as finishes go. So we'll call this little episode done.
Wait, there's something else. So if you're following the build, you'll recognize this. This obviously should have been the first part of last week's video, but for some reason it wasn't. So this was the front of the boat. I cut it out and put it to the side, and I really had no thoughts of what I was going to use and what I wasn't going to use at the time.
I cut these wings off at the foundry to make it a little more manageable, and it had these flanges that actually turned up because it came up the front of the cabin, and I'm going to need them to turn down. So I cut those off. I'm going to put them in the boat, mark a fair curve around there, and see if I can incorporate the whole thing in the new remodel. Getting ready to do a lot of cutting. I put a vertical line here. I have a fair curve drawn here with the Sharpie. I'm going to cut that off, and then this is backed up. The bottom is backed up with plywood, and I'm going to have to get rid of that maybe an inch back so I can make a joint there. I don't want plywood to be in the joint. This is the front deck I want to reuse. I cut what I think is a pleasing curve through here, and some of it was really thin, so I've added another layer of glass all the way along. I'll have to grind it semi-flat, but for now I'm just trying to beef it up a little bit. And along here and on the other side, the wooden core was exposed all the way to the edge, and that wasn't any good. So I basically turned this wood into smoke with the grinder and got rid of it. So now it's back away from the edge. So I'll take the clamps off. I'll sand this fair, and I may end up putting another layer just to make it so that when I put the skirt, which will come this ways, that I'll have a good beefy intersection to make it strong.